点点，呃，냐면 다보그 lembe 추이게
Today is the anniversary of the uh, founder of the peerless Kagyu teachings, the King of Dharma and Lord of Dharma, the protector of beings, Gampopa Sonam or Lord Gampopa. Today is not only the anniversary of Gampopa's parinirvana, it is also the anniversary of the day on which the third Karmapa, Ranjan Dorje's face was seen in the moon. And it is also the day of the cremation of the remains of Khenpo Tsotum Gyatso Rinpoche. Likewise, for my own self, my very kind father uh, was also cremated today, and so for this reason, in terms of worldly and dharma, in terms of the common and personal, it's a very special day. It's a special day with the five things coming together. And so it's a day when four different anniversaries have coincided. And in particular today, the main thing I'd like to speak about, since we are reciting the Gampopa Guru Yoga, I thought I would speak a little bit about Gampopa. So Gampopa, his birthplace, as many of you know about Gampopa. However, if I give a brief introduction to his, Gampopa's birthplace is in the central Tibet, in one of the southern of the nine valleys of Yorpa, in a place called Nyel. And in terms of the present day, this is a place called Nyaltu, which is in present day Lunsezong. And he was from the Niwa clan. His father was Niwa Haje Gambar, and his mother's name was Shomotsa Tsecham. She was born to them in the year 1079 of the Common Era. And so in the Tibetan astrology, it was the Earth Sheep year. And he passed away in the water bird year of 1153 at the age of 74, counting the full years. So today I don't have the time to speak about his life in detail, but I would like to speak about his life in terms of three main points. And so what are these three main points? The first of these is about how he founded the Dakpo Kagyu. The second is how he spread the teachings of these sutras. And the third is how he benefited people through Mahamudra. And the fourth is speaking about his texts and the important texts that he wrote that we read. So these are the four main topics I'd like to speak about. And so among these, the first of these is how he was the way he founded the Dapo Kagyu. So we often say to ourselves, we are Kagyupas. We say we are in the Dapo Kagyu lineage, but But many people don't really understand what it means to say we're Kajupas. Many people think the reason that they say that we're Kajuba is that because their parents were had faith in the Kajus, and so because of that, they think that they are Kajubas. Or because you become a monk or a nun in a Kaju monastery or nunnery, and therefore you think to yourself, oh, I'm a Kajuba. And so it's kind of doubtful whether we actually have a deep understanding of what it means to be a Kajuba. So we first need to think about what it really means to say that we are Kajubas. This word, Kajuba, actually has a very, if you take the broadest possible understanding, the first one is the two syllables, ka and ju. And so the first is to explain the word ka. So ka means something between the treatises and the words of the Buddha. It means the words of the Buddha. And that is what is understood to mean. Ju means holding a lineage that is passed down from one person to the next. So when you add the ka, put the ka and ju together, it means that someone who upholds the lineage that of the gurus who've transmitted the words of the Buddha. And so if you think about it in this way, then basically everyone who holds a Buddhist lineage could be called a Kajuba. You could very well say this. And it would be quite reasonable to call them by this term. And so for this reason, there would be therefore many Kaju lineages. The Kaju lineage is also sometimes called the Atisha Kaju. The Geluk lineage is called the Genrin lineage of the Gerin Kenju. And the Bodon Pension lineage is called the Bodon Kaju. The lineage passed down from the Kyumbo Namjora is called the Shampa Kaju. But these days, what people generally understand when we say the word Kaju is people understand it as the name of a particular lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. For example, if you ask any monk from the Sakya, Geluk, or Nyingma lineages what lineage they're from, if they're good Nyingma, they'll say that they're Nyingma. If they're from Sakya, they'll say they're Sakya, right? They won't say I'm a Kaju. And the reason why they say that they're not Kajus is not that they're saying that they aren't part of a lineage that upholds the lineage words. That's not what they are meaning. It means that they're saying they are a member of a specific Kaju lineage. So if we talk about the main point, the way the name is used and understood has changed. So Kaju Buddha actually means it can be understood to mean everyone who upholds a lineage of the Buddha's teachings. But gradually the name has, in terms of how the word is understood, has changed so that it refers to a particular Tibetan lineage. This is what it's directly understood to refer to. So if you talk about how it's understood these days, the way we think about it now, it means the lineage of instructions of the four instructions of the four oral transitions of the Indian Mahasiddha Telopa. The Indian Padanaropa received this transmission and then passed these four transmissions on to the Tibetan Guru Marpa the translator. Then Marpa brought these transmissions to Tibet, translated them into Tibetan, and then established them by teaching and meditating on them. And he had many disciples who upheld these lineages, Lord Milarepa, Meitong, Ngolchuku Dorje, and certain Wongu Dorje, and so forth. And so And so this lineage that maintains the transmission of these four oral transmissions is what we call the Kaju. Now, when we talk about the four oral transmissions, there are different ways that they can be explained, but I won't go into that today. Also today, with the Kajupa, the Drupal Kaju, sometimes called the Karju. They spell it with a ra, with an R. So they call it Karju instead of Kaju. But but it's more common to say Kaju. This is more commonly used. So this the origin of this Kaju lineage is from India. In India, there were many Mahasiddhas who upheld this lineage, including Tilopa and Naropa. Now, the way that Kagyu teachings were spread in Tibet is that Marpa the translator became Naropa's disciple and then brought this Kagyu lineage to Tibet. And following him, Jetsun Milarepa, Gampopa, and Rechungpa all appeared in succession. And after that, they spread the teachings of the Kagyu, which spread widely. And then from then on, Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa were called the three Kagyu forefathers. So among them, one of them is Lord Gampopa. So Gampopa was not only one of the Kagyu forefathers, he was also the founder of the Tapo Kagyu lineage. So if you think about it in another way, it could be explained is that if there had been no Gampopa, then there wouldn't be what we call the Dapo Kaju now. So Gampopa had many different names. And among them, one of the most well-known is Dakpo Rinpoche, or Lord Gampopa, or Youthful Moonlight, or Sunam Rinchen. These are the most well-known of his names. Now, among these, Dakpo is the name of a place or region, and Gampo is the name of a mountain. So the Lama was then given the name of the place or the mountain. Now, before Gampopa, there was a Kagyu lineage, right? During the time of Marpa and Milarepa, there were Kajupas. But later, the Kagyu was primarily called the Dapo Kagyu. It wasn't called the Marpa Kagyu or the Milarepa Kagyu. And so why was that, you might ask? Of course, you can say Marpa Kagyu and Mila Kagyu. It's not said that there isn't such a term. There are these terms, but later what became best known is that people would, when you said Kagyu, but people understood it as the Dakpo Kagyu. And the reason that mainly reason this happened is that before Gampopa, there was a Kagyu lineage. But even though there was a lineage, but it hadn't really developed into a full-fledged monastic system or a religious system. So you could say basically there wasn't any before that. For example, with Lord Marpa, we spake in regular terms, he was basically like lived like a father in a village. And he gave the ripening lineage of the secret mantra to a few qualified students, but he didn't have a large number of students. And at that time, his residence of Doralung was not even yet called a seat, monastic seat. Or with Milarepa, he was even more of a renunciate, even more of a yogi. And he lived in mountain retreats in no fixation. And he taught students whenever he could, but never settled anywhere, never founded a monastery and gathered a group of students. He didn't do that, and he didn't enjoy doing that. And this is very clear. So wherever Milarepa went, whenever there's a place where Milarepa, we say there, look at places where Milarepa stayed, you say basically see an empty cave or an empty mountain. Or it wasn't like there is any great seat or any great monastery. There's nothing like that. Later monasteries were built at Milarepa's practice place, but earlier there weren't any of those. So when we talk, the one reason, so it's often said that the seats of the Kaji forefathers are solitary mountain retreats, and that is what is meant by that. But with Gampopa, he was actually unlike either Marpa or Milarepa. And the main reason for that is he was a monastic. Marpa and Milarepa were both lay people, but Gampopa was a monastic. And from a young age, actually not, actually when he was in the prime, in his 20s, he entered a monastery. So he entered a monastery and he entered the monastic system. So he was staying within the monastic organization. And in particular at that time, it was there are many Kadampa monasteries in the area of Pempo and U in central Tibet where the Vinaya discipline was very strict. And that's where he went. And he also received many teachings from many Kadampa teachers before he met Milarepa. And so his external appearance was that he was an upholder of the Kadampa Vinaya teachings, or a Kadampa monk. Later, as Milarepa prophesied, he went to this monastery called Dahla Gampo. He went there, and then many students gathered from Uzang and Kham, from central Tibet and Kham, so gathered around it. And he had among them, there were 500 Arhat-like disciples. And then there are also many disciples who engaged in yoga practice, but who the external Vinaya discipline. So in the externally, they practice monastic discipline, and internally, they practice engage in yoga practice. And so there are 51,600 such disciples, 51,600 such disciples. And so there's a huge monastic community who gathered at Dahla Gampo. And among these students, his greatest disciples included his familiar nephew, you could say. This is Gampopa's older brother, Yawasere's oldest son. This was called Gompa Tsoto Nimpo. So Gompa Tsoto Nimpo became he was Gampopa's nephew, and he was Gampopa's disciple. Like you see, like the region of Gampopa. So he was these three different qualities. And so the main student was Gompa Tsoto Nimpo. So when we talk about Gampopa and his nephew, he's the one we met. He means his main disciple. And so for students, Gompa Tsoto Nimpo had the appearance of being inseparable from Gampopa. Then after then, there was like the master of realization and activity, Pakto Dorje Gyalpo, the holder of lineage of compassion and emanations, Tusum Khenpo Chökyi Trapa, and the yoga of power and austerity called Barum Dharma Kongtrul. So these were his four main disciples. In addition, he had the four siddhis, four heartsons, four closons, four attendants, four yogis who achieved yoga bodies in Kachari and so forth. So these were his greatest disciples. Likewise, there was a lineage of the Pakdrupa that descended directly from Gampopa and Gompa Tsoto Nimpo. So these are the Pakdrupa, the Karma Kamsan, the Barum Kaju, and the Tsalpa Kaju. And the Pakdru Kaju, from the students of Poma Dorje Gyalpo, included the Jikung, Taklun, Trupa, Tropo Kaju, Marzang Kaju, Gyalpa Kaju, Yasang Kaju, and Shungsep, which are known as the four pairs, 8 lineages. And so all of these, the origin for all of them is Gampopa and his nephew, and in particular, it came to Gampopa. And so for this reason, Milarepa had earlier had prophesied that in the future, People won't say the Milarepa's practice lineage, but they'll say that it's your Dapokaju. So people will say Dapokaju. They won't say Milarepa's practice lineage. People will call it the Dapokaju. So this is what he prophesied. Likewise, after Gampopa had left Milarepa, Milarepa made a prophecy to his students, and what he said is, he said this. He called him the physician. He said the physician from Napa will benefit many sentient beings. And the reason this is that last night I dreamed that there's a yellow bird that flew from me to central Tibet. He went to the central Tibet, flew there, and then in the end he landed on the peak of a large mountain. And after he landed on the peak of that large mountain, then from all directions there were many yellow geese that gathered from all directions. They all gathered there around that mountain peak. And then after a little while, all those yellow geese all flew off in their own directions. And each of those geese were followed by 500 other geese. So each of those original geese was followed by another 500 geese. They gathered many students. So like all of the basins and valleys were filled with were filled with geese. So this is the dream that Milarepa had. So Milarepa said, "I'm a yogi." So I'm a yogi because he was a lay person, right? He was a lay yogi. But all my followers will only be monastics, he said. And so I have done something for the teachings of all the Buddhas, he said. He said, I have served the teachings of them, the basis, and so the teachings of the Buddha's teachings is the foundation for that is the teachings for the monastics, and so I've done something for those, and because that will happen. So he said, in this way, he was predicting Gampopa. Not only that, he also had a sponsor named Chame. And when they were holding a Gana Chakra, then Milarepa sang a song of question and answer, in which he said the Nirmanakaya prophesied by the Dakinis shines in the beings as the sun in Dakpa. The Nirmanakaya prophesied by the Dakinis will be like Gampopa, and he'll be shining on all beings like the sun. So in this way, he praised Gampopa. So in the same way as Milarepa predicted, it actually occurred as he said. And so if we summarize this, during the time of Gampopa, it was that only during the time of Gampopa that the monastic system of the Kamakaju developed and appeared, and it was because of this that the Kagyu became one of the began to follow the path that would make it one of the larger traditions in Tibet. And so this is why we call it the Dapo Kagyu tradition. And so this is why it is called by this name. And so that is speaking about how Gampopa founded the teachings of the Dapo Kagyu. So now we will speak about the second point. Now, the second point is how Gampopa spread the view and conduct of the sutras. So it's speaking about how Gampopa spread the vast teachings of the view and conduct from the sutra tradition. So Gampopa had studied with many Kagyu Kadampa gurus. So first he was a householder. Not only was he a householder, he got married, a son and daughter. Later, as it said, son and daughter both died, and then his wife also passed away, and then he went forth as a monastic, and he became a monk in the Kadampa tradition. So at that time, he studied with many Kadampa gurus, famous ones including Nyugrumpa, Geshe Gyaluna, Gyacharikwa, and Geshe Chayulwa, and many other Kadampa gurus. Now, in the writings of Drikung Kyopa Jigten Sumgon, he writes in the Dapo Kaju there are three transmissions: the transmission of the view, the transmission of conduct, and the transmission of pith instructions. So among these, the transmissions of the view and conduct are from the Kadampa. And the way they come down from the Kadampa is that the transmission of the view comes from the Geshe Gyalundak, and the transmission of conduct comes from Geshe Nyurumpa. And so this is the way it is described by the Drikung Kyopa Jigten Sumgon. So these two geshes that Kyopa Jigten Sumgon spoke about, Gyalunda and Nyugrumpa, were masters whom he followed before he met Milarepa. And from among these two of them was Geshe Nyugrumpa Tsundu Gyaltsem. So his actual name is Tsundu Gyaltsem. So from him, Gampopa received the Kadampa instructions, and in particular the instructions on bodhicitta and the bodhisattva vows. So what Gampopa himself said was that guru, in other words, Nyugrumpa, had genuine relative bodhicitta. He had actual relative bodhicitta, real bodhicitta. He had roused that in his being. And just as he had that genuine relative bodhicitta because of his compassion and blessings, I also developed genuine relative bodhicitta. And from that time onward, I've never been apart from precious bodhicitta. So from the time that he took the instructions on training bodhicitta and took the bodhisattva vow from Geshe Nyugrumpa, from that time onward, he has never been apart from precious bodhicitta, he said. And in his Dharma talks, Plentiful Qualities, he speaks about how critical bodhicitta is. Thus, this relative bodhicitta is important. The reason why it's important is that at the beginning, at the outset, it's indispensable at the beginning, because without that, you won't be going down the Mahayana path. If you don't have relative bodhicitta, it doesn't become the Mahayana. So relative bodhicitta is very important at the outset. It's really important in the middle, because without it, you'll fall into samsara. And so this time, the samsara he's speaking about the great samsara, as described in the jewel ornament of it's describing the great the great samsara. So the great samsara of both existence and peace, not just the extreme of existence, but also the extreme of peace. So I think we can also understand this as including the extreme of peace. And it is necessary at the end, because without it, you will not have the two form kayas. And so he was here speaking about how critical bodhicitta is in terms of his own experience. Now, he spent 8 or 9 months studying with Geshe Nyugrumpa. But because he was stay among many people, and his previous meditational experience of shamatha meditation deteriorated. His shamatha meditation was not so good. And so he heard that there was a Geshe Gyalunda who didn't have a large gathering of students, who stayed in isolated places. And so Gampopa went to see Geshe Gyalunda. And so Geshe Gyaltsuk didn't have many people around him, and he was also in a very isolated place. And so because of this, Gampopa's shamatha also meditation also improved greatly. And so Geshe Gyaltsuk said to Gampopa, I will teach you. So I teach his oral instructions. There's a lineage that's interpreted not even by Geshe Trungpa. Trungpa means Drone Trungpa. So it's as if, so I'm going to give them as if they are given to you directly by the Buddha. So what he's saying, basically, like that, is that there's Atisha, and then and he had the instructions given directly from Atisha on meditation. He's passing them down, these authentic instructions to him. And so he taught him the fifth instruction. And so Gampopa already had good instructions of shamatha, and in addition, he also developed the insight meditation. And what happened in particular that when he had first gone forth, he had met a Geshe Bodhisattva. So Geshe Bodhisattva actually had instructions from Milarepa. He had the spiritual instructions from Gampo that had been passed down from Gampo. So these superior instructions of meditation from Geshe Bodhisattva. And so he had meditation instructions from Geshe Bodhisattva, and he had the experience of meditation from that. Then he also had the instructions from Geshe Gyaltsuk. And so the essence of these, of the insight that he had was exactly the same. And so he was able to go right down the instructions given by Geshe Gyaltsuk. And when you practice these instructions, so these fit exactly with the instructions of meditation that he had earlier received from Geshe Bodhisattva. So there's like a really critical point that we can speak about more later. In any case, what Geshe Gampopa said is, Geshe Gyaltsuk had a genuine realization of impermanence. And he had a genuine insight, and I also developed the same. So basically, what it's saying that Geshe Gyaltsuk at that time was known among all of the masters in Central Tibet as having the highest realization of all the Kadampa masters. And Lord Gampopa developed realization that was equal to or the same as his. Now, as I said before, according to Drikung Kyopo Sumten, the transmission of the view came from Gyaltsuk. And so the main point here is that Gyaltsuk had received a transmission of the view passed down from Atisha to Gompa, and that is what he gave to Gampopa. Now, Atisha was very well known to be fond of the consequentialist middle way view. And so for that reason, the reason why the Dapokaju presentation is very similar to the consequentialist middle way view, it probably comes down to this reason. If we read the teachings of the Eth Karmapa Mika Dorje, we will see this. Likewise, when you think about the stages of progressing down the path in the Dapokaju, it's called as the four yogas. There's a very particular tradition. And this same terminology is clearly described in the Mahamudra teachings that Atisha gave to Gompoa. And I think this is further evidence of how this came from Atisha. So in addition to that transmission of the view from Gyaltsuk, when Gampopa met Shetsa Milarepa said to him, be certain of the view, look at your own mind. So he gave a song that said that. And he also spoke about the four pitfalls of emptiness. And in particular, in the song that Milarepa sang when Gampopa was going to Central Tibet, he sang this song. And the song begins, son, when the unelaborate arises in your mind, do not follow conventional words, and so forth. And so later, these included many points about the view. And when Gampopa had taught Mahamudra, he emphasized these points of view when he taught. And so this is another really important point. And in particular, the Mikya Dorje, the eighth Karmapa, wrote in his text called The Complete Discussion of the Mahamudra. What it says, the manner of teaching the shamatha and insight is that is common, or the causal vehicle of the transcendences is the pith instructions of the lamp for the path of enlightenment passed down from Atisha to the great spiritual friend Trungpa and Gompoa. So in other words, known as the co-emergent yoga. So basically, the teachings, the fifth instructions passed down from Gampoa to Trungpa and Gompoa, and this is called by the name of co-emergent yoga. It's passed down to Gampopa, and then from Gampopa to Pakmo Drupa and others. And so the Kagyu masters called this, if the students of degenerate time who like lofty vehicles, they called it the co-emergent yoga of Mahamudra. The foundation of this are the instructions of the co-emergent that came from Atisha, and that is given the name of Mahamudra. So when you talk about the co-emergent yoga of Mahamudra, if we think about it as it's described in the complete discussion of Mahamudra, then this is basically giving the name Mahamudra to the co-emergent yoga of the tradition of Atisha. So, according to Maitripa student Saraha Vajra's commentary on the Ten Suchnesses, Atisha's 10 suchnesses, which go well with the Tantra, are called by the name Mahamudra. So this is called the same. Likewise, Lord Gampopa and Padmadrupa and Jigten Sungam also said that our Mahamudra texts so what it says is that the Mahamudra text is the commentary on the sublime continuum of Maitreya. So basically, the meditation instructions that included the teachings from both the experience that he had from listening to the Kadampa instructions on shamatha and insight. And so he had the same experience as Geshe Yundak. And so this is, I think, another important point. So in this respect, this speaks about Gampopa's practice and conduct of the sutra tradition of Gampopa. Now, the third main point is how Gampopa benefited beings through Mahamudra. Now, I'm speaking about quite a bit. It's taking a bit of time, but there's nothing to be done. So now I'll speak about how Gampopa benefited beings through Mahamudra. So Gampopa at that time had studied with many famous Tibetan lamas of the time, and not only asked for many pith instructions, he also went to many places, such as Nyase Olung and Ulka, when he spent many years practicing primarily Tummo. So his main practice was Tummo. And so he was very diligent about this practice of Tummo. And in the end, he realized his mind essence was the Dharmakaya as it is. So he received, after that, he taught his students directly how to practice this according to the instructions of the King of Samadhi Sutra. And so these direct instructions are what we call now as the co-emergent yoga of Mahamudra. So the pith instructions passed down from the Kadampa, and the pith instructions coming from Milarepa, and then there are also his own experience, and he combined these all into one. He mixed them all together one and called it the co-emergent yoga of Mahamudra. So this is the Dakwa tradition of co-emergent yoga of Mahamudra. So Gampo was really actually very skilled in nurturing students and very good at giving instructions. So he was able to write like innumerable students. He brought them to ripening and liberation. Now in Tibetan, we talk about mind instructions. Say, please give me mind instructions. When you say mind instructions, most of these mind instructions are basically taking Dapo Rinpoche's instructions as an example. This is according to the Jonon Jetsun Taranata. So when you think about how skillful Gampopo is at giving these instructions. So what are there any examples of it? Just saying that he was really good at it is it's not easy. And if you want to give some examples of this, as soon as I have to tell a story. I think many of you maybe heard this story already. There was a person named Ramdun Trungpa had been born in a place called Dota Damkar. So he was a student of Gampopa's. And he was someone who just naturally could remember past lives. He had not just one past life, but 13 past lives. And he was really bright. So when he was 13 years old, his mother, so when he was 13, his mother was 70 years old. And so when he got to the age of 13, his 70-year-old mother went blind. And in addition to going blind, there was her mother's brother. I think it seems like his actual, I think it's younger, so a younger uncle, and he wanted to get married, and so he stole all of Ramton Trungpa's 70-year-old mother's things. You need to go get married, so you need things, and so he stole all of Ramdun Trungpa's mother's things. Not only that, Ramdun Trungpa also had a brother. The brother was a monk, and he was who had been given to the Geshe Sampo Darton um, as a student. And so, but he had contracted leprosy and he was sent home, but he died on the way. Now, he also had a sister, and the sister was 18 years old, and so she'd been sent off as a bride to another family. But they couldn't complete the marriage, it didn't work out, and she was unable to come back to her mother. And so she became a beggar. So it was only the two of them, Ramdun Trungpa and his mother, the 70-year-old mother. They were the only two left. So because they were alone, he had nothing to do. So there was a Nyingma Lama who was a father, and he went to beg for some food from him. And this Nyingma Lama gave his mother a six-syllable prayer wheel, like the Mani wheels that we have. Even he gave it to them. He said, you do this, and you send your boy to go to central Tibet, Tsang in central Tibet. There's a student of Trokpupa named Tsangnak Shakyadhara, so send him to him. It's best to send him for a student there. And he wrote a letter and gave them some offerings and sent him to this to Nyingma Lama named Tsangnak Shakyadhara. So Ramdun Trungpa when he got to central Tibet at that time, the Tsangnak Nyingma, this was said not to be it was probably not a very pure tradition. And so he had a little bit of some suspicions about it, and he didn't quite believe about it. And so he decided that he went to Dam Nyedrung instead. When he went to Dam Nyedrung instead, he met some traders who were coming from central Tibet. And so Ramdun Trungpa asked them, in central Tibet, who are the most people? I don't want to know about the Nyingma tradition, but in the Sarma tradition, who are the most important Sarma teachers? So when they asked who are the most important people, what the traders say was, in Tsang, there was the Sakya Master Kuan, In central Tibet, there's Karak Nunchun and Nirusupa. They were very famous, but they'd all passed away, they said. These days, they said that there's a student of the Yogi Milarepa, a student called Dhammanigam. Dhammanigam, he's in the south, they say. And everyone considered to be an undisputed Siddha, they said. So this is what the traders told Ramdin Trungpa. And so Ramdin Trungpa, because he had some sort of karmic connection, when he heard about Dakwa Kaja, then immediately, it's like he felt it as like his body and mind are kind of like breaking apart. It was a really strong feeling. As after he had that really intense feeling that night, he had a dream. And what he dreamt was that a woman who was wearing who had a lot of white silk ribbons in her hair, and said, "If you're going to go to Dapo, then follow me," she said. And so this he dreamed. This is what he dreamed. When she said this, he sort of felt like he was going there. He felt like he was going someplace. Then so he wasn't quite sure exactly how to. He found himself at the foot of the Gampo Mountain. He sort of feel like he just didn't know. He didn't go himself. But it's they brought him to the foot of the Dahala Gampo mountain. And at that point that he got there, is like he got there at the same time as the first lights of dawn was shining brightly on all the peaks. So he actually didn't go there. It was like in a dream that he just didn't know how. How he immediately arrived there. So when he got there, when he looked at himself, the clothes that he were wearing, he had just a few. He didn't just have the clothes on, but he didn't have his shoes. He didn't have his belt or anything. It's like he was carried away in his dream. The Dakinis carried him off while he was dreaming. So he didn't have shoes. So he'd lost his shoes. And he'd taken off his belt, so his clothes were kind of. And so he didn't have it, so he wasn't wearing a belt. He wasn't wearing shoes, and he was kind of wondering what's going on. And where am I? He was wondering. And then he thought to himself, "Oh, this is this. They said that if you're going to Dapo, follow me. So this must be where Gampopa is." And so they thought that Gampopa will look at me with compassion. So they immediately, he'd got to the foot of the ridge, so they started climbing the mountain towards the summit. And when he got there, and there was like this grass straw hut where Gampo was staying. And when he got to the door of that, he heard that the sound of people reciting a text. So he heard the sound, and so he went in. He went into Gampopa's room. He didn't knock on the door or anything. He just went directly in. And when he got in, Gampopa's head was like his head was sparkling. Dude, he's wearing his meditation belt, and in front of him there were four bhikshus. And what the four bhikshus were doing, it's like there's the 8,000 line Prajnaparamita. So they were there reciting the Prajnaparamita. And at the side, there is a stupa of great enlightenment, and there were like a set of 5 offerings in front of that. And then on the left side, there was like a red silk curtain. It's kind of like a tent or a curtain. And he could have heard a little bit of a sound coming from inside of that. So he had just gone directly in, and when he did, and at that point, the Gampopa's attendant, as I said, this person, if the person had never asked to go see it, he'd never said, "Please give me an audience." He just immediately came in. So why is that? So he said, "Go out," and he kicked him out. So so he was expelled or kicked out. And once he was kicked out, Ramdin Trungpa thought to himself, The feeling they had, it's like they couldn't think about anything. It's like all the appearances of art just stopped. So like there's couldn't think about. And he sat there and he probably basically just sat there. So at sunset basically, in the evening at maybe it's probably like 7 or 8 at night, he's sort of sitting there and kind of in a bit of his mind completely stopped. And he said that it's like everything, all appearances stopped, and then in a minute, this young monk came, and he had this feeling this monk was coming like pulling him, and he started coming. He woke up, and someone had brought him some soup. So he drank that took, but then it's like he sort of like he fell asleep, but it wasn't like really sleep. He was sort of sitting in this. And the next morning, at the time that the sun rose, he woke up. He sort of felt like he woke up, but one second he thought, I need to go see Gampopa. And when he went, he tried to go, but he couldn't. It's like his body, and it's like he had no longer had any control over his body and speech. It's like he had no control of his body and speech, and so he sat there in this kind of strange state for 7 days. It's like all appearances had stopped, and his perception had ceased, and stayed in that state for 7 days. And after 7 days, then early one morning, he had another dream. What he dreamt of was like a big poisonous snake. And that is what he had like fangs and horns. And in between that, it's like eating all these sentient beings, like that with all this blood flowing all over him. And he sat and stood in front of that. The snake was in front of him. It's like the snake was about to eat him. When he drank it, then he got so terrified that he immediately sort of wake up. It's like he woke up, but it was like he was asleep. So, then immediately he went up and he goes, then he immediately it came to Gampopa. When he got to Gampopa, then Gampopa, it's like before he had gone into Gampopa's place, and it's the same sort of scene. Gampopa was sitting there wearing the meditation belt, and around him there were the four bhikshus, just as before. And so after that, there was a Chungsamwa. Chungsamwa was a student of Gampopa's. So on the left there was that sort of tent, or it was the curtain with a red silk curtain where you could hear the little sound. And so he opened that up. So Chunsanwa opened that up. And when they opened it, then what there was inside, there was like a seat made of human legs. And on top of it, there was a naked red woman wearing with her hair loose, sort of sitting in the middle of flames. And she had like a lute that was made of human bones. And so this is what he saw. When he saw that, then immediately the wisdom of Mahamudra arose in his mind. So he developed Mahamudra wisdom. And when he developed the Mahamudra wisdom, he realized the Dharma nature as it is directly. And so then next to Gampopa, there is the stupa of great enlightenment next to him, right? With the five and so that stupa became like a huge, so huge that it filled all the universe. Like filled all it, and the shining rays of light became huge. It's like it was filling the entire universe. And on the peak of that, there is a small, there are many, there are many uh, with Gampopa's body. Some were huge, some were small. Some were dancing, some playing, sing, some were blenders, or some doing. They're doing everything at all. It's like all these different Gampopas of different sizes, and so that's how it was. And so this Ramdun Tumba was this is how Gampopa pointed out his place. So this is how he was introduced to the name. So he was later he was summoned by the king of Minyak. And so this king of Minyak said is, as I'm really wicked, so please, since I'm so wicked, please give me a way to develop wisdom. And so when he said that, then Ramdun Rinpa he did exactly what Gampopa had did for him, where he had to point out the mind to him. And he did the same thing, gave him pointing out the mind to the king, and the king developed a great superior experience, and because that he developed the shamatha experience. So it's like in the past Ramduntab had spent 7 days in that expedition. So it's like then the king of Minyat spent 5 months in the state of shamatha, like with this mind completely stopped. So after 5 months, all the ministers and everyone just had to wake up. There's so many important things we have to do. You have to wake up. And so they waked him up. But other than that, the king was saying that. And this was not only the king, but this also happened, also the queen and many ministers also had such a superior experience. And so the way we know this is that later when uh, Rinchen Tsangpo and Tisharepa came to Minyak, and when they came to Minyak, at that point they had this on the holy days, that like the 10th and the 15th days, and also Gampopa's anniversary. They observed these anniversaries, and they had the tradition of giving out empowerments on that. And there's pointing out instruction of Mahamudra that was still practiced, undiminished, even later times later. So Tisharepa when Tisharepa and those people went to Minyak, they saw this. This is one of the example of how Gampopa pointed out the nature of mind. Now, another way, so this is not quite as long. So the second was that there's a monk named Dapa Wangya. So he's in, so there's a Dapa Wangya, there's a monk, and he's a nephew of Yarpo. When he first started studying text, like the shut up, shut up students, but he got bored with it. And he thought, oh, I need to do some meditation now. And so he went to the great Kadapa Geo Shinyan, or Master Neosupa, and he spent 14 years meditating, but he never really got any feeling from it. And so later, he heard that Gampopa was very well known, so he decided to go see Gampopa and said to him, Rinpoche, I spent 12 years studying many philosophical texts. I've studied a lot of philosophy. I've read many tomes, but I never recalled death. I couldn't develop an understanding develop realization of interdependence, of death and impermanence. Later, when I thought because I'm impermanent and because of death, I can't just continue like this. And I spent many years, for 12 years, I practiced meditation. I tried to practice meditation. I did a lot of practice, but my mind just wouldn't rest at all. So now I'm 73 years old. I've got to the age of 73. So I've no one else that I can put any hope in but you, Rinpoche, so please help me. And so he prayed fervently to him. He supplicated fervently, and then Gampopa replied to him, well, what use is it to have a settled mind? The mind's going to rest, then what good is that? And if your mind doesn't rest, isn't settled, then what harm does it do? Is there a mind that experiences happiness and suffering? For example, what benefit is there clouds in the sky? If there aren't clouds in the sky, what harm is there? And at that very moment, when Gambapa said that, he thought to himself, "Oh," and he sort of had some faith and meditation. He said, "Oh, that how must be." So he had developed that understanding. And one day, Gambapa said, "Come." And Gambapa summoned him, and he went into Gampapa's quarters, and by the door there are Darton and Gungton, who must have been Gampapa's attendants. And so they said, and so first, don't go in first. Just sit down here and meditate. And visualize especially go at the crown of your head and pray and supplicate. And just as I made him do meditation right there in the door. And he started meditating, and suddenly there are there's two attendants. One of them he's created a huge dust storm. It's like when we do song, we make a lot of smoke. He made a big song sensor, and he made a lot of smoke. And the other had a lot of water, cold water. And he threw it on the monk's face. So one did this smoke and one did the smoke, and immediately his mind stopped. He had no expectation they're going to do that because, so, he never had any idea that Gampopa would like play a joke on him like that. And so one of them, gave him a lot of smoke, and he was like, let's throw the water, and he was like, his mind stopped, and at that very moment, Gampopa came right out there, and it was like these happened at the same time. And because these two happened at the very same time, what he thought is like, when the Gampopa appeared so suddenly, he had no idea that he was going to have all that smoke and all that water. And then all of a sudden, Gampopa should it's like the way he saw Gampopa was like Gampopa was as huge as Mount Meru, like a huge mountain. And when he was like, he's kind of looking up at him like that. Then Gampopa that had in his hand, he had a cane. So he took this cane and he struck him so hard on the top of his head that he's going to feel like his head was going to split in two. And then immediately all of his body and mind perception just stopped right there, and he just stayed in this wisdom that completely ineffable developed. And it's like the Gampopa just dissolved. It was like going to dissolve into this mass of light. But it just couldn't like see Gampopa's body clearly, so it was just dissolving into light. And it's from then on, it's that he's been able to find some develop some good experience, and his mind is able to. So there are many other such stories. So Gampopa himself was because Gampopa really understood what the level of other people's minds, and so sometimes he was able to do. He had something that would be really young monks who'd give point instructions to them and introduce them to Mahamudra. This did happen. So what Gampopa said it is that some geshes who teach philosophy say that Gampopa has ruined on many of these young monks. It gives Mahamudra instructions to young monks who don't even know anything at all. And so there are some philosophers and geshes who criticize for that. But I have the great hope that these young students will be able to bring great benefit to sentient beings. In Ensunikai's Gampopa himself always knew the kind of level of sentient beings he was able to know what their capabilities are. And so he had a lot of confidence. Because he had that confidence, And generally, though, still what he taught people for the way commonly taught people is he taught most students the stage of the path of the three types of individuals from the Kadampa tradition. And only when their mind streams were purified did he give them instructions in Mahamudra. So Gampopa said that once he had a dream, and that in the dream he found like a Gao amulet. And that Gao, there was a there's a person named Gao to him says, "Show me to me. Show me this Gao," he said. And so he said, "I had this dream." He said, "I'm not going to show it to you because there are many of Atisha's relics and many of Kata's pith instructions," Gampopa said in the dream. But Gompa Choyong was so insistent that I opened it and I showed it to him. That's a dream I had, and so for that reason, a little bit of help that I've done for other sentient beings is primarily because of the Kadampa tradition. Now, the instructions of Narupa's instructions are meditations, but if they're not connected with a Kadampa, the benefit is slight. If you only teach Naropa's instructions and don't join it with a Kadampa, then it's difficult for it to benefit. So you teach the common stages according to the Kadampa tradition to train someone's mind station, and only then do you give the instructions of the 6 yogas. So basically, at that point in the Kaju Lamas, like Marpa, Ngokpa, and the Sakya Yogas and Drogpa and Barlo Tsa and Shatin Kunganima and Nyingma Lamas taught such as Surcha and Surchung, but they primarily taught the Tantra. And most of them were lay people. Also at that time, the lineage that spread widely at Tibet at that time was the Kadampa lineage. And they primarily focused on the Vinaya and the practice of the vehicles of the transcendences. They kind of like they prohibited the practice of the secret mantra Vajrayana. Lord Gampopa had both the tradition, Tantra, and union. Or in other words, he had the Kadampa meditations he had learned earlier, and then the paths of means liberation received from Milarepa later, and he practiced these two together without giving up either. Later, as Milarepa had prophesied, he went to Dhala Gampo and had many students from central and eastern Tibet. They all gathered. He taught them the common stages of the path, and he gave them the special instructions in the Mahamudra and the 6 yogas. And by doing this, he created what we call the confluence of the rivers of Kadampa and Mahamudra, or the teachings of the Unya, Sutra, and Tantra. So in conclusion, I'd like to speak about I mentioned this talking about the texts of Gampopa. So now so in general, as I mentioned before, Gampopa essentially has such a great being, but he wasn't a lot as he's no longer with us, but they're the texts that he wrote. These are like the representatives of his body, speech, and mind. And so what Gampopa has said is that the people in the future who have faith for me, who are unable to meet you, if they shouldn't think that if they feel like they don't have the fortune to see him, that they're unfortunate, they have misfortune of not seeing. What they should read is this. Please read the text, the Precious Crown of Supreme Path and the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And if by reading them is no different than meeting me. And so, as Gampopa said, then we often read the texts of Gampopas, in particular during the on the anniversary, we should think about the True Ornament of Liberation. We should open the texts and study them and discussion. It's very important for us to do this on the anniversary of Gampopa. Often we often talk about the speaking statues of Tara and so forth, but when you have the words of the Guru, the texts, we have these statues that said that, or said to once speak in the past, we consider those to be very sacred, but when you have the actual speech and words, it's just right there, bread for us. We just don't get them important. We close of the complete works. We leave them in the middle of dust and forget about them, and just put them in a shrine room. Of course, it's not right to not okay to throw texts in the garbage, but it's like we're doing basically the same thing. And so what Shopatsuka Lajin said is that the and so to all Kaju students, read the two volumes of Gampopa's collected works. Read the instructions, the profound instructions of Gampopa's Co-Emergent Yoga. And so the other, so be so consider you spoke about how important it is view the that you receive develop here and practice in your siddhas by reading the collected works of the Kagyu masters and practicing them. And so that is what I have to say today. So next we will recite the Tapo Kagyu. So we'll have a little bit of a break first.